Welcome back, folks. So last time, a couple of sessions ago, I had done this session on pain demystified, and I got some feedback on this that um, their finishing was a bit abrupt, which was kind of understandable given the complexity of this topic. But this is a follow-up session uh, with reference to that earlier session that I had on pain demystified. So I will be going quickly through the slides that we covered last time and explore more or elaborate more on the things that we left uncovered. Although here too, there is a slight chance that one might still feel there is a lot to cover, which we'll try and address as much as we can. So real quickly to go through what we had covered last time. We understood different types of pain. We saw the pain scale. We understood what pain meant from this definition. There could be several definitions, but we particularly focused ourselves with this definition. We understood about change, and then we went through this very important notion of being identified with an object, which led to this confused state where there was a unification between a minus and the I-ness. And then this is where we kind of stop, that we need to put some distance between the objects that the mind dwells on and ourselves. And this was one of the starting points that we can begin to address this change of attitude. So we can slowly begin to put this distance. And when I say that, this is what is slow here? When we say, when we begin to start putting the distance, how long will it take? We go to a doctor, we are injured our hand, and we ask him, how long will it take to get healed? And he might say a couple of days, he might say a few hours, he might say a year and a half, or he might say, this is difficult to say. So this change is something that's going to take a long time, and we'll understand why. And then we will understand even the fact that it is difficult. It's a very personal thing. Okay, so in order for us to be able to put this distance, we need to understand how the mind works, this specifically from the perspective that we have been trying to understand. So when we look at a slice of the mind in an instance of time, the mind, the way it operates, it is a constant influx and outflux of thoughts. It's life. If we were to submerge a person underwater, if we hold somebody's head down underwater, he will be fighting for breath, trying to come up, because that's his life. Similarly, if we, let's say, make an attempt to not have any thoughts for some time, the mind is going to fight back because that's its life. And the degree of intensity, the degree of sincerity you put into this effort will leave you astounded as to the vehement backlash, the effort that the mind will push back with when you try to do this. The strength that it has been grossly undermined, and we take too much of the mind for granted, but that's just how things are. So what happens is that if we were to look at the thoughts that are racing through the mind, and we compute a rough average that these are the thoughts that occupy the mind most of the time. And we can then maybe take a slice of that and analyze it. Some of the things that we will find are not that surprising, and we can easily relate to it. Most of the times, there is this sense of self preservation that is there, and due to which mm, we find that there is a sense of worry. The mind has got maybe 100,000, 200,000 thoughts, and it constantly it's building new thoughts, but it also goes and plunges deep down into this well and brings up its favorite thoughts. And those are the ones that keep bubbling on the surface of this mind, the most active ones. And most of the time, if we do the analysis, we find that it's trying to do some degree of self-preservation, where there is a constant undercurrent of a worry. There is a concern that I we are not doing something or we do not get something, and because of which it is a threat to my existence. And there is this worry that is there, that there is a uh, faint undercurrent that's there. It sometimes there is an upheaval of it. Now, other than that, the other thoughts which dominate the space of the mind are those where we have gotten into a habit of things. Now, it can be a time bound thing, but gradually habits tend to culminate, they tend to grow out and become a full blown addiction. Different kinds of addiction. When we say addiction, there is obviously a physical manifestation for it. But in terms of the mind, the those kind of thoughts that dominate our mental space. Sometimes we are aware of it, but most of the times subconsciously they are always occupying our the thought. A little opportunity, a little space they get, they will swamp the mind space and they'll take over, the dominating ones. Now, we have known that our problem is that when the mind concentrate, focuses, is obsessed with a certain object, it becomes that object. And by virtue of that, we understood that it became a process of identification. And therefore, when that object was undergoing an undesirable change, it hurt us. So we said that we want to put this distance. And therefore, here are some cross section of thoughts. So we have got this red, black, purple, yellow thoughts that are there. And since we have figured out that we want to put a distance between the thoughts, we pick some of them. We say, these red thoughts, these are the ones I want to target, because upon analysis, I have determined that upon eradication of these ones, I would get the most amount of peace. For for whatever kind of uh, prerequisites requirements we came up with to decide that these are the ones that we do not want. So how do we not want? How do we take out these red thoughts from the mind? And when you give some thought to it, it turns out that this is a very difficult proposition. It is not as easy as you go to your backyard and you find that there are a few weeds going in your garden, and you go and you just yank them out from the ground and you chuck them out into your garbage. You cannot do that with thoughts. The the way the mind works, the dimension in which it operates, we don't have this kind of access to it to be able to do this. There is a story that's an anecdote that is very popular around this context, that there is this king who is pretty wealthy. He has acquired a lot of name and fame and wealth and whatnot. And he is still not at peace with his current state. So he goes and approaches a wise man who is known to be peaceful and calm. And he says, I will give you, oh wise one, whatever you ask for, but I want to have a similar state as yours. And the wise one says, okay, that's easy. I can make you get to that state, and we can make this happen. You can come at the same time tomorrow, and we will take care of this issue of yours. And King is very happy, and he's been used to that kind of life where he asks for something and it gets done. And then he is about to leave when the wise one says, when you there's just one condition I have when you come back tomorrow. The king says, you can name it. I will give you whatever you want. The wise one says, I don't want anything. The condition is that till tomorrow, I do not want you to think about a monkey till tomorrow, 11 o'clock, whatever time. And then, we'll take care of this problem and you'll get your calmness. And guess what the king is thinking the rest of the day, the night, the following day? The one thought that is there in his mind, the one that he needs to remove, is that of this monkey. We know this very well. That's what is we experience this in our day-to-day life. So having identified things that we don't want, how do we go about removing that? So the technique, the mechanism to do this is, supposing there is a chamber that is full of marbles or pebbles, let's say marbles, and it has got two ports, two holes, two openings, and it is edge to edge, it's filled with marbles, red and blue and black and green, all kinds. And if you force some yellow marbles from one side of the box into this box, from one hole, there is no space in the box to accommodate these additional marbles. So what happens? The other port that is there, it spills out some extra number of marbles in order to make space for the new that you want to introduce. So mind, it appears as though it likes certain thoughts and therefore it keeps them around, but it's not the case. It is a case of how one trains the mind, how it has been brought up, and we can coax it gently. So there is also a lesson here that if, let's say, I'm addicted to tea and I say, this might be a little bit far-fetched, but even then it will make sense. I say, from tomorrow onwards, I'm going to stop doing it. This is yanking out the weeds. Most of the time it won't work. It doesn't work like that. So the other mechanism that is there is we find something that is of equal, actually better, that is of better value than what is there in the brain, in the mind. And we gradually introduce these other thoughts. Now, the condition is that the bonding that, let's say, these red thoughts that I have with the mind or in the mind, the condition is these green ones that we want to introduce, they most definitely should have at least an equivalent degree of bonding, but more so, it should have much more than that. And as time goes by, the bonding should get even stronger and stronger. And so what happens is that as we introduce these other thoughts into the mind, and we ask the mind to focus on them, to play with them, to concentrate on them, then it is a very gradual process, like a ligament healing in a hand or in a feet, or not feet, but in the leg. It takes time, this process, and gradually it will happen that these green thoughts will start replacing some other thoughts. And if the red are the ones that are dominating, it will replace the red ones. But the tenacity with which one bonds, clings the thoughts to the mind, we should have an equal degree of it. So this is a technique we can employ that is far more suitable than the yanking thing that we just saw earlier. The other problem with the yanking thing is that one might feel that you have plucked out a thought from your mind and you are good, but even before you know it, you turn around and it's present right there. Just like the weeds, we yank the weeds out from the ground, and in a few days we come back and there they are, probably more. You took out 5 of them and now there are 15 of them. So that's what will happen in this case too. So the correct way, or one of the better ways, even easier ways, is to introduce this other thought with an equal degree of bonding. And this process will take time, but it's a definite process. If you ask, how long will it take? Well, it's not going to be done in hours or minutes. The thing is that the red thoughts that are there, we don't realize they have taken an enormous amount of time to establish their dominance in this mental space of ours. They have taken years for them to settle down and do what they do. So for us to introduce the green thoughts is going to take at least that amount of time, and definitely more than it. For the advantage, there is an advantage to this process, that the mind, when it begins to, first it will try and push back on the green thoughts, but once it begins to understand them, begins to be aware of them, it's like, like when we call acquiring a taste. You taste the new food item for the first time, and you just don't like it. And even beer, for that matter, first time it's bitter and all that, but after some time, people begin to like it. So anyhow, so the technique is that we introduce the thoughts that we want to supersede these red thoughts with. And this is the mechanism, this is the technique that we will use to put this distance that we mentioned earlier. Now, we have to be very aware, we have to be very careful that when we do this, we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. What I mean is, let's say I am an addiction to tea. I want tea 4 times a day, whatever. There's some addiction I have. That is my red spots. And I want to bring in these green thoughts, which are going to kill this addiction that I have for tea. So I introduce these green thoughts. Now, I don't want to go into the fire from the frying pan, right? From the pot into the fire. I don't want to do that, because I might introduce addiction to a drug or alcoholism. And they now will take over my brain, my mind. And so I would have successfully eradicated the red thoughts. But at what cost? I have bought an even more deadlier poison. I used the same technique, but I picked the wrong thoughts. And so this is a danger that subconsciously, probably these things keep happening in life, but consciously, when we are going to try this, we want to make sure that we pick the right kind of thoughts to employ this strategy towards. So what characteristics do we want to have in these thoughts that then we can employ this technique and focus our mind, our attention, so as to replace these other red thoughts that are abound in our mind. It could be our car, it could be our position in the company, All those are the red thoughts. So in order for us to be able to keep them at bay, we don't even need to eradicate them. We need to keep them under control. They shouldn't affect us that much. And for that, we are bringing in this army of green thoughts. And so, what what characteristics do these green thoughts need to have? Based on our earlier session, we want these thoughts when we want to focus on this object. Let's say an object, although it's kind of wrong to call this thing as an object, the entity, this entity that we want to lay closeness to should be imperishable, should be unchangeable. So when we get that, then if we attain success in introducing this, then we don't have this fear of having run into an even more stressful catastrophe. So when a thing is imperishable, then obviously it is not going to change into something and cause me hurt. Now, unchangeable and imperishable are kind of synonyms because if something changes, it means it is perishing. If something is imperishable, it means it's unchangeable. They are synonymous. There is a reason I have both of these together because we'll, in a couple of slides later, we'll see why it comes up. And then we also wanted to have it, we want it to be something that has got some emotional substance to it, that it cannot be dry and a rock. It's life. So one of the few examples we'll see in our later slides, and this thing will become apparent what I'm saying. So we really just two characteristics we want in this object that now we want to employ our entire mind to in order for it to take the place of all these red spots, red thoughts that are bubbling in our mind all the time. That is it's imperishable and it is blissful. It has got an emotional substance to it. So now that we have got these two traits, characteristics defined, we go out and we start searching for the existence of such a object that is there, such an entity that is there. And one might say, upon looking around, that we have heard that diamonds are forever. Therefore, they are imperishable and unchangeable. Let's take this at face value. But practically speaking, even the hardest of diamonds, the way they have been crafted or they have got these edges, if you use the hammer or some hard object and you strike it at the proper angle in the proper way, it is possible to break away pieces of the diamond. I don't know, maybe even a whole slice of it. But let's say that we have found this object. Although we know that the entire earth is going to perish one day, and that's for those who know, that is a story for another day. But our sun is going to become a red giant and it's going to engulf the closer planets, even later planets in the solar system. That's the fate that our Earth awaits in the distant future. And at that point, whether this diamond will exist or not, we do not know. But even if we take it that it may not be everlasting. Diamond may not be forever, but at least they last a long time. The problem with this is that it has no emotional content to it. So even if one were to buy diamond, the most expensive diamond that is available in the world, and indestructible one, and all kinds of tests it has been passed. We we find that maybe 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, we look at it and it gives me pleasure. And after a month, 2 months, it's hardly, you probably don't even look at it. You probably don't even notice it until it has gone missing. I don't know if for anybody who has seen that movie called as Castaway. It's a Tom Hanks movie. He's just left marooned on an island, and then there's a football, and he names it as Wilson, and he comes to think of it as something living. So this diamond, you cannot make it alive. You can maybe have some degree of a relationship with it, but it has no emotional content to it. Now, when it comes to us for finding things that do not change in this world, the we don't have too much of time to get too much detailed into this analysis, but in general, matter is generated out of energy, and as such, in general, energy seems to have a longer lifetime than matter. The changes that take place in matter, they are evident. We look at them every day and we know about it. We do not know so much about energy. There may be changes taking place there too, but we do not know more about it. So that's one thing. The other thing is that when we and I because of lack of time, I want to jump into another topic where the the core, the identity of a person, the more pure he becomes, the more pure it gets, then it is our experience that it leaves us more in a state of peace, in a state of bliss. And we will see a little of this. There are a couple of slides that I'll be going through that discusses both these aspects of being imperishable and unchangeable, and the quality of peace. Now, using the word quality is a bit misleading, but for lack of a better word, or for lack of time even, I'm going to be using that. So I'm slightly switching gears coming with the next slide, but we'll get back to this, the thing that we are discussing, namely identifying something that we can attach ourselves to in order to get rid of the red thoughts. That is what we are trying to do. Now, switching gears, when winter comes in, we are the same person that we have been all our life, but we put on all kinds of different winter clothes because we cannot survive without this. So the environment, the circumstance demands that. So we put on a scarf, a hat, shoes, whatnot, all the winter accessories. Me as a person, they they don't change me like that, but physically they are accessories that go on top of me, right? We I do this in somewhat unwilling way, and I after a while I accept it as a part of life. Especially, if you're coming from a place like India to in the Northeast in United States, where you are not used to these kind of clothes. In fact, in India, you won't even get these kind of thick clothes that gets used in the Northeast. And maybe for a little while, it might be a little bit of fun, but afterwards, it's kind of bothering us. We have to put on this thick jacket and a scarf and all those things that we have to put on. It starts becoming a bother, but we don't have any choice. So we put this on, and maybe gets a little bit of cold. You put on a thinner jacket. Gets more cold, you put more stuff on. You put hand warmer. As the cold goes on increasing, you want piling up more and more things, and there comes a point and it's so cold, and you're asked not to even go out and stay out for more than 2 minutes. Otherwise, the freezing cold is going to hurt you somewhat. So it gets to that stage. But the point I'm making is that we put on all these additional stuff that we don't want. We are a little bit suffocating with all that, but we have to do that. Now comes spring, and one by one, we start getting rid of these extra accessories that we had put on. And for those who live around here, you'll notice that it kind of gives you a sense of pleasure, a sense of joy that I am becoming me, and I lose all these extra accessories. I lose as much as I can, lose out everything. First the coat, and the shoes, then the hat, and one after another till I need to I want to go for a swim because the weather has gotten so nice, and then I might be left with a very, very scant amount of clothing only because society demands. I don't even want that. This progression that has taken place from the accumulation of these accessories to the gradual eradication of them, it is delivering a kind of pleasure by virtue of a state of freedom we are approaching. It's a state of freedom. We get rid of unnecessary accessories that we have been. If somebody asks you, even if it is summer, that you need to put this on, you need to put the scarf and this and that, you need to put all that. You cannot. First and foremost, you'll call that guy crazy. You will not listen to him, and it will become very, very unbearable after some time for us to be sitting like that. So we want to get closer to who we really are subconsciously. We sometimes we make a deliberate attempt, but most of the times physically we definitely see this happening. Physically, all these extra burden that we have, we see ourselves losing that and getting back to our state. What happens to us from a mind, from a mental standpoint? So let's take a quick look at that. So our whole life we can summarize in 3 states. We can say that I'm awake in my waking state. I move about, do things, and then I go and I interact with the world. I'm a father, I'm a son, and whatnot. Different relationships I have with different things in the world, and this a person which is who is awake, who is interacting with the world. This person has a entity that is sitting inside of himself. So this is like when I say I am a professor in the college. I am a cyclist. I'm riding a bicycle. I am a chef. I'm cooking the kitchen. I'm a teacher. I'm teaching. So all these roles that I take, they are identities. The chef, the teacher, the cyclist, what they are identities. But then the I that is there, it is different. We have seen this in our previous session as well. So the body itself is undergoing change. We say, I was a child, I'm a boy, young man, I'm an old man, and so on and so forth. The I continues to remain unchanged, whereas the outer characteristics are changing. So that is a distinction. We have seen it in our previous session. So when I'm awake, it's almost like there are two eyes. There is a changing eye, and then there is an unchanging eye. The unchanging eye is observing everything that is changing eye is done, even processing things for him. And this is a very, very big topic. We are just going to scratch the surface only. That is uh, we absolutely necessary for us to do this analysis. The next is I go to sleep. I come home, I go to sleep, go to bed, and then I dream. I dream that I'm a cab driver in New York City, and I'm taking people from here to there. So now, in addition to me being a teacher, a chef, the cook, a cyclist, now I am a cab driver too. And in here too, now remember, as long as the dream is there, it is very true for us in the dream, whatever is happening. And so here too, there is an I who is not changing. There is an I. In the dream, we are not locked down by the shackles of our senses. So we are free to fly up above mountains and swim deep inside ocean, do whatever you can. The mind makes us do that, and things happen. The freedom is there, but still we are free from the sensory world, from the limitations that the sense have put on us. And in the dream world, all those are gone except for the limitation of the mind. The mind can do number of things, the things that it cannot do. So the we are not going to get into that at this minute. But the mind is at play here. And then there's this I. So there's an I that is there, now it is not changing when I'm awake. There has to be, because all the things that the changing fellow is doing, the unchanging guy needs to assimilate that. And similarly, in the dream world, there is this changing I, then there is this unchanging I. Now, the unchanging I in the awakeful state and the unchanging I in the dream state, are they one and the same? That we'll see if possible. And then the third state that is there is when we don't have dreams, and then we go to deep sleep. And there, at this point, it is a very weird thing. This phenomena is most striking and most stunning. This is a remarkable phenomena in deep sleep where we are not aware of anything. And this is a very deep topic that one can get into. There is a interesting question that gets poised at this moment. In this deep sleep, is there an experience of nothing, or is it nothing that we experience? Yeah, and I can understand this is a difficult question to understand and grasp, but I'm going to just leave us with one analogy that will perhaps shed some light on this state. Because, like I said, this is not our aim here to understand that, but just one quick analogy that when we open our eyes, light falls on objects, and we are able to the eyes they take that light in, and we are able to see things. And so we move our eyes around, and we see things. The eyes, they're open. Now, if we are put in a pitch dark room where no light from anywhere is possible to enter, and in this room we are sometimes questioning ourselves. It happens in movie theaters, this kind of condition, when you just enter into the movie theater, the movie is yet to turn on, so it's dark in, and when you were outside, there was a lot of light, sunlight. So the pupils have become very, very small in order to address the light that was outside, and the huge cliffs that is there. You step inside the theater and it's pitch dark, and your pupils have not had a chance to dilate enough to see what is there. So it's like pitch dark. And then you open and close the eyes, and you still cannot see anything. It's so dark. So, what is it? Have you gone blind here? We know that's not the case. It's the case that the eyes have nothing to experience there. It's not that we have lost our eyes. And so also in the deep sleep, it's not like we don't exist. We are there. There is nothing to experience there. But it is us without any of these accessories, and that thing gives us a refreshing state of mind. Most of the times we know that get when we wake up from a sound sleep, we feel refreshed. Actually, it's more than that. There is a sense of peace, there's a sense of pleasure also that is there in that. And it's a very big topic, and I don't want to get too much into it. But notice that just like when we got rid of our clothes, and one by one, we came closer to being our original self, this exhilaration, this joy that we are deriving out of it, that similar thing is taking place over here. We got rid of our senses, then of the mind. So it's giving us that state, and it's possible to go up even further. So we will leave this at that at this moment at least. But we can see that this I, which is progressing through all these different identities from the dream to the waking to the deep sleep state, then there is this unchanging I that is there. It's by mere English grammar, we know that there is an unchanging I. We say that we went through this exercise, right? I was a teacher, I was a chef, I was a father, I was a brother, I was a cab driver, I was this and that in the dream. So lots of changing things, and then there's one unchanging thing. So I have a quick analogy about what this unchanging thing is. I'm slightly rushing through this because I don't want me to go over 1 hour. I'm already at 42 minutes, so let me. So this example that is there, I'm comparing ourselves to a TV screen. And then in the waking state, the screen, the TV is interacting with people. People are watching it and it is interacting with the people. And I'm just stretching this example a little bit, but one can easily get a hang of it. It's like, these days there's this Alexa and Siri, and you can tell that Alexa, change my channel to so and it will listen and it will change your TV. So we know it's not alive, but it looks like it is alive. The funny thing is that is also the case with our body. The body, the mind is inert. We know that. If somebody chopped our hand, we don't die, right? So that's not life. We know it. But it's a complex state of affairs. That is a discussion for another day. It's a wonderful discussion. Maybe if time permits, some other I might have a session just on this topic. In fact, one session may not be enough. It's a very convoluted topic. Nevertheless, so we have got this TV that people are interacting with. So this is our waking state. So notice that the switch is turned on the top. The TV is interacting with the people. Then there are no people, but the TV still stays on. It happens. We we retire to the bedroom, or we go out, the TV is left on. There is nobody there. The TV is still on. So that is comparable to the dream state. And then we know that our computers, after a while, when nobody is interacting with the computer, it kind of shuts down on itself. It's not completely shut down. You come and you use your remote or mouse something and it wakes up, right? So that is the deep sleep state. Now, if you see here, the identities are changing from the waking, dream, and deep sleep. But what is not changing, what is making all this happen, is what is in this left hand side over here, and it is the power, the electric current. It is on, and it is what is making all this happen. All these fun things that we see, all these complicated, complex, they all are happening on account of this electricity, this one electricity that is running through all these states. And when we turn the switch off, which is this last thing I've said, the TV just stops working. And if I were to say that when I turn this off, all electricity in the world has disappeared, you will see how ridiculous and foolish that statement sounds. By turning a switch off, it doesn't mean that it it has made the electricity itself dead. Electricity, you cannot, whatever you do, you cannot kill it. It will be there in some form or another. It is electricity is imperishable in that sense. Okay, so this I that is there, which is making us function, is different from the waking state, the dream state. It is different, but it is, all these states depend on it, but it doesn't depend on any of these states, and it has got its own identity. Now, why are we doing this analysis? Because this I that we looked at so far in our analysis, so we saw that it definitely has emotional content. We saw that, because when we get rid of the accessories, the entitlements that were unnecessarily put on this I in the state of deep sleep, we know that there is a sense of joy that is there. Of course, we don't want to be in the deep sleep state. That's not the implication is not that, okay, so I want to be happy, I need to be in deep sleep forever. That's not what is being said over here. Just this one aspect of I. The fact is, we should be able to understand, appreciate, recognize, realize this I, this unchanging I that is there in deep sleep, even in the waking state. When we watch this TV, we know about the electric current. We can, we may not be able to see it, but we can feel it. Similarly, it can happen in the waking state. This I can be recognized, but we just choose not to, or we didn't even think about it, whatever the case might be. So when this I is going through these different states, one might, the two traits that we were looking for, right, the imperishable, the unchanging thing, and the emotional substance of this I think we have already covered that part. Now, in terms of the imperishable nature, when a body is born and it dies, does it disappear? Is it gone? Carl Sagan, a very famous astrophysicist, he had made this remarkable statement, very famous. He said that all of us are stardust. What he meant, or what he meant by that, or what he means to say by that, is that this whole the reason it is called a solar system, because it came from the sun. This earth came from the sun. And so the body, whatever it is made up of, it's not made up of nothing, right? It's made up of some material. And where did this come from? It came from the sun. And so when the body dies, where does it go? Some people bury it, it will get cremated, burnt, whatever happens, it just resolves back into the original components from which it was made, right? We know that. So in that sense, even the body from a energy standpoint is not like that perishable, but the problem with the body is it's inert, although it might be imperishable in the sense that it continues to exist. after the death, the, the, the shape and the form is gone, but it has resolved back to the original elements. Now, the same analogy can be applied to the conscious self of man. So the reason why I am able to interact with the world or understand the world is because I'm conscious of it. I'm aware of it. And this awareness that is there can be thought of as a direct parallel to the physical body that is there. Just like the physical body resolves back to the things that it was made up of, it it cannot not exist. It just exists in a different form. So the consciousness which this has entered into the body, which enlivens this body, similar to how the body after death doesn't perish, this consciousness too is resolved back. Now here is the $1,000,000, even if you care about dollars. The question is, resolves back to what? See, here the thing is that if there is a composition of things, then things break down back into whatever they were composed of. Consciousness is not composed of anything. One might make some clever argument and show, it is actually made up of this, two, three objects. Now, even this hypothetical argument or one can make, but we know, everybody knows that we can never ever in a laboratory put things to make together and make consciousness out of it. It's not possible. It just doesn't, it's a different thing. It's a different entity. It is not made up of anything. And by virtue of that fact, it is not perishable. So there is one more example that will make this point really clear. We have got cars being assembled in an assembly line. So people put this car together and they bring it out and it then sits on a parking lot. And when it sits there, it just sits there. Nothing happens till the point that some driver comes and sits in the car and drives. Till that point, it might have the greatest technology ever imagined in that car, but it is not going to drive itself. A driver, something outside of the car, has to come and occupy the car in order for it to do what it does. And when this driver leaves, the car goes back to its state of not being alive. It could go under further destruction, but whatever life that it had was because of this driver who was outside of this car. So, similar to that, when a birth takes place, when a body is takes place in the womb of a woman, of the mother, something assembles the body together, but it doesn't put consciousness. Consciousness comes from some other place, and it occupies the body and makes it alive. And similarly, upon the death of this body, consciousness goes back to an unresolved state, but it is not perishable. We do not have the intellectual abilities and the capabilities to understand the state that it goes back to after that, or for that matter, even before birth. But we do know that these intellectual capabilities, they are merely defined by our ability to articulate things. And this is also what you might call as intuition. We understand things sometimes, but we are not able to express it. And sometimes we may think we have expressed, but nobody gets what we are saying. So this consciousness that is there in man, it is an unchanging thing, and it is associated with unperturbed bliss and peace. The two traits that we are looking for this green thought that we want to introduce in our mind to for it to then take over our mind and push out the red thoughts which are a cause of pain for me. So we know the technique and now we know this object. Is it going to be an arduous journey? No doubt, no doubt. Maybe arduous is not the word because there might be an initial struggle, but after a while, one will begin to enjoy this journey. The whole point is that right now we are in a state of a confusion. There is a weird mix of the changing I and the unchanging I, and we need to do a intense and an immense amount of constant self introspection to be able to get to this level of purity. And so this is when we purify something. Gold is smelted. You smelt gold. On purifying an object, notice that we never ever add things to it, right? We keep removing things from it, and then it gets becoming more pure and pure. And when we say something is 99.9% pure, I don't know if there is something that we can call as 100% pure thing. The only thing that can get 100% pure has to be in the abstract world, because whatever you do in the world of matter, there will always be some impurity present. But in the state of extreme consciousness, where there is nothing but consciousness, if we are able to rid ourselves from the shackles of the senses that have been forced onto this body and through that body onto me. This freedom is the thing that will take us close to that experience of just this I consciousness, this unchanging, unblemished I consciousness. This is what we should drive. This is what we should strive for. And this green thought, if we are able to introduce it, I say the word if as if there is any other option. There is no option. Whatever research one might do in order to find an entity that has got these two traits, after a long analysis, they will come up with something that is similar to this. The freedom that we get on understanding this I is also a, a reverse effect that when we become free, we know the I. So it works both ways. And when we say freedom from all these different conditioning that these senses have put us under, one needs to definitely remember that we cannot yank it out like that weed. We need to start going towards this unchanging I, this unchanging consciousness. And as a corollary to that, as a side effect to that, gradually, this is a very, very gradual process. It's one may not even realize how this happens, but one will find that one is breaking these chains with which he is bound. If you go the other way around, let me take out these chains. You are in for a very hard and tough time, possibly an exercise in fatuousness. We will not get success. It is only by going towards something, not against some force, that we will be able to get success in what we are trying to do, namely introduce these green thoughts, let them take over this mind of ours, this being of ours, Let us revel in this land of unchanging, unperturbed bliss. And it is a condition where we are not in a state of conflict with anything. It's the most wonderful thing to even think about. One might argue that this is a very hypothetical scenario, but when you look at the synergy and the symbiosis of the different forces that are acting in here, it's a wonderful state. We don't have a conflict or fight with anybody, just a state of unperturbed, just a recognition of that, a realization of that. So we saw that we, in our initial session, I'm almost at the hour now, I'm slightly over, but just as a finishing point here, that we saw that the car or other objects, when the mind sufficiently focused on it, it became part of the mind. And so we were not differentiated from that object. And therefore, when that object underwent some undesirable change, we were pained. Most surprisingly, and in a very, very good way, the same phenomenon can happen here. And when the mind is sufficiently focused, we will reach that state where the only thing that will prevail and which will overwhelm in a nice way our whole being will be in this state of unperturbed bliss. I hope that this session has been useful to you, and it is a relatively good conclusion to the abrupt finish that I had for the earlier session. Uh, as always, any feedback is welcome, and thanks for listening to this session.